Hi everyone, and welcome to the sixth episode of Athletic Inc.'s Coffee Chat. Today we have a very special guest with me, Dr. Mike Newton. He was a senior professor at University. He's the author of over 50 peer-reviewed scientific publications, and he currently works as a lifestyle medicine consultant and an exercise clinical physiologist. Mike, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming.
Fantastic, great to be here, Carl.
All right, Mike. So how's everything so far with you?
Oh, really good, thanks. I just did notice in the introduction that you'd mentioned I was an associate professor previously at Edith Cowan University. I was actually a senior lecturer at Edith Cowan University. Then I shifted to another university in my home state and took up an associate professor position there. Worked there for a couple of years before I moved out into my own business. So I was in academia actually lecturing and researching for 20 years. Can you believe that? And then I've sort of moved out in the last 7 years or so into my own company. I've got a couple of companies running, and that's been fantastic. I bring a lot of what I've had in academia into my private companies. It's you can't get away from doing that. You've been really skilled in trying to be critical and using a sort of evidence-based approach. So that comes with me into my sort of new life, as I call it.
All right, thanks, Mike. For the viewers that don't really know this, you were actually the person that got me started into strength conditioning. Okay, so it's just a little bit of background. Mike was my professor at Edith Cowan University, and I got the chance to work under him for 2 years, and he gave me the opportunity to work with a lot of athletes, a lot of the sports clubs, a lot of the professional teams. And from there, that, gave me the interest to become a strength conditioning coach and to what I'm doing now. And if it's not for Mike, I wouldn't be in this situation. So first of all, thank you very much, Mike, for that.
Well, I should say thank you, Carl, for volunteering to work with us. That's when we were running the Human Performance Center at Edith Cowan University. It's something we set up on the side to try to really give a lot of the students that are keen an opportunity to work with elite athletes and to try and sort of cut their teeth basically in the area. And you were one of the people that volunteered to work with us. It was fantastic and brilliant working with you during that time.
Yeah, I had so much fun and I learned so much from you guys as well. Mike, perhaps share with the viewers a little bit about, you starting out working in strength conditioning as a lecturer, and then, working with athletes, and now slowly moving towards what you're doing now, more towards the lifestyle medicine and wellness part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Well, in the early days, I actually chose to study at a certain university because they had a strength and conditioning unit. It was the only one I could find at that time that had a strength and conditioning unit. It was very rudimentary in those days. So I went through as an undergraduate student, absolutely loved it, got on well with the lecturer at that point who was teaching that unit. Eventually finished the degree and had a real passion. They saw that. They offered for me to come back and do a honours year. So I did a 1-year research honours in that area. At that stage, we didn't have anybody at the university with any real expertise in strength and conditioning. So I did my honours in sort of a blood biochemistry area, looking at lactate methodology and such. But my passion was really muscle physiology and resistance training and strength and conditioning. So I came back to do a master's degree a few years later. And at that stage, there was a chap that had arrived from the University of London, and he just completed his PhD in the area of muscle physiology. And so I really jumped at the opportunity to work with him. I wanted to do a PhD, but he wouldn't let me do a PhD to start with. He said, no, I want you to sort of go back and sort of learn some techniques in the muscle area because you hadn't been working in that. And I was really happy to do that. So I was supposed to have a 1-year master's degree, and it ended up becoming 6 years because we were a bit ambitious in what we wanted to do. And it was fantastic, though. I had to literally learn how to do some work in histology, so I could learn how the muscle worked from the inside, and a lot of the physiology in there. We looked at the electrical stimulation of muscle. We had to actually then take the muscles out and actually have a look at what happened to the muscles after training. We set up a little device that could train animals, believe it or not. So we could literally train them when they were anesthetized, and that would allow us to have a look at how the muscle responded to a form of resistance training. So I did that for my master's degree. Then I went on to do my PhD in the area of sort of muscle physiology and biochemistry as well. So I stayed in that area, and then I got offered a position lecturing. And of course, one of the units that I was given was the resistance training unit, and I took it under my wing and just loved that and grew it for a period of time. And then after a few years of lecturing, I was thinking about no postgrad degrees in this area that I could really find. Michael Stone was doing a little bit of stuff, Professor Stone, in the UK at that stage. He moved from the US to the UK, and he was doing a little bit of work in that area. I think it was Edinburgh University, if I remember, University of Edinburgh. And I sort of had this idea that maybe we could offer an offering through the university where we started at, say, a graduate certificate, worked through to a postgraduate diploma, and then through to a master's degree in strength and conditioning. I didn't really have anybody in the team at that stage, so I went to a head of school and said, this is my idea. They loved it. They sort of thought it could have legs, and asked me to try and build that. And I needed to get some people that were really good in the area to come in and help with me. So I attracted a person back from the US that was working there, originally an Australian. He came back in, and we worked together, and then had a couple of other people, a gentleman by the name of Angus Burnett that was working with me as well, a biomechanics professor. And also then we brought in a really good recruit, actually, from the US. That was Professor Mike McGuigan. And Mike came in. He wasn't a professor at that stage. He is now in strength and conditioning. He came through, and he was instrumental, really, with Angus Burnett and Professor Rob Newton and myself and a couple of others in trying to pull together this degree that eventually became the master's degree in strength and conditioning, with a few exit points at the lower levels if you wanted. And now that's run by Professor Greg Haff and Professor Sophia Nymphius at Edith Cowan University, running a really fantastic program there. And it's lovely to see something that I thought about in the early days and wished we had, and got supported by the university to build, and went on to build that area. And that's kind of my strength and conditioning area. Hence, I started up the Human Performance Centre at the university as well, that you were involved with helping in with the elite athletes and teams. And that was really to get a lot of practical hands-on experience that, one, we as lecturers could take back to our students in teaching, and two, that the students could actually get that real hands-on to learn if they had aspirations to move in the strength and conditioning field. And that's exactly what you've done.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now hearing about how you've started this, so long ago, and how it's helped so many of us, who've come through the Edith Cowan program and have now decided to stay on. I know that some people eventually move on to doing other things, but I'm just glad that that program was there, and the people, the people you mentioned are actually the people that I got to work with, and so that really helps, for the pathway that we are in now. So
well, the other good thing about it, Carl, is that a number of the people that have come out of the degree, like yourself, have moved out into the strength and conditioning field, and they're all over the world now. I mean, we have alumni everywhere. It's unbelievable. It's so exciting, in actual fact. And when I get a chance to catch up with them, they're in all different walks of strength and conditioning, from the professional teams throughout Australian rules football, rugby, soccer, in the hockey. They're across in America. They're in the NBA. They're in the professional league baseball. They're absolutely everywhere now around the world. The Europe, America, everywhere. So we've got such a good alumni, and it's fantastic for a lot of the newer graduates coming out that they've got people out there that have come through a program that's been set up, and that's the one through ECU. There's a few other ones around the world now, and there's some good ones in Australia as well as outside. Stu Cormack runs a really nice one out of Australian Catholic University as well. Mike McGuigan is involved with some great stuff in New Zealand. So they're everywhere now, and it's really exciting to see people going out there building businesses like you've done, or working in professional teams. And it's exciting to keep in contact with these people. Yeah,
definitely. Thanks, Mike. So tell us a little bit more about what you do now. I know the transition has been a long one, and this is a lot different compared to what you were doing previously. Is this something that came up all of a sudden, or is this a sudden interest, that have got you into this?
No, it's an interesting journey, because early on in the game, when I was doing the work in strength and conditioning, I was also very interested in the clinical space, and I was working with a couple of colleagues. This is really early days, before there were any professional associations in Australia looking at clinical exercise and this type of thing. But I was working with a couple of my colleagues and in that space, and I always had an interest in helping people with different conditions and bringing some stuff that we had in the strength and conditioning field into the clinical field. I mean, if you have an understanding of how to set up and intervene with resistance training programs and aerobic interventions and like intensity training, high intensity training, that type of thing, that can work exceptionally well in the clinical space, in the patient space. And we see that all the time. There's great articles coming out all the time now looking at utilizing things like high intensity interval training, resistance training with patient populations. So it's kind of a natural thing to be working across both fields. And then the industry became a little bit more sort of regimented in Australia. So we had associations, and we have a great one in Australia now called Exercise and Sports Science Australia. And they accredit a number of people in actually really interestingly, not just in the clinical space. I'm what they call an accredited exercise physiologist or a clinical exercise physiologist that's accredited with that association. But they also, the same association in recent years has moved into professional sporting arena. So they don't just have clinical exercise accreditation, they also have sports science accreditation as well. So I'm also an accredited sports scientist as well as an accredited clinical exercise physiologist, or what we call an accredited exercise physiologist. So a lot of the stuff runs across. And so it was kind of a bit of a natural thing over many years. I started working in the university. One half of me, I've nearly felt schizophrenic in a way, because part of me was in the strength and conditioning field and absolutely loving that. And the other part of me was in the clinical field. And therefore I was teaching in both areas at the university, in our clinical exercise physiology course, as well as in the strength and conditioning area. And over years, I just sort of moved. I've been in academia for 20 years, wanted to have a bit of a change. Some people were saying, why don't you move out into professional sport? But I decided to move differently and into the clinical space. And when I say clinical space, into the lifestyle medicine space. And my clinical background has really helped in that as well. So I do a lot of work now with my company, with the executive space, with people that we call them the corporate athletes in a way, so the executive athletes, because we utilize a lot of information, a lot of the skills and techniques that we've been employing in the strength and conditioning field in that area as well. And I guess, by way of example, one of the things that's extremely important in our sort of clients, athletes, you want to call it, executive athletes, is they're working under huge stress, just like athletes have huge stress in a different way, the physiological sort of stress, and often mental stresses that's coming into competition and things as well. Where our executive clients, they have huge stresses. They work, well in excess of 50 to 60 hours a week, some of them 70, 80, 90 hours a week. Very, very large stresses there. And that has a huge impact negatively onto the body. So we can utilize a lot of information that we bring from the exercise space, and also lifestyle medicine encompasses nutrition, sleep, stress management, as well as exercise. So we can bring all of these types of things into play and to get great results with our clients. And we're seeing fantastic results. They all go through full medicals when they come through the front end. So they'll get resting ECGs, exercise ECGs, full blood panels, a number of tests such as, strength and endurance and flexibility tests, these types of things as well. A lot of our corporate clients think, why would you want to be doing such a thing as a strength test, for example, or a power test? And we have to explain to them that grip strength now has been shown to be a stronger predictor of all causes of death and disease than blood pressure. So, and that's a nice paper in 2015 out of Lancet. It's been subsequently supported by other research as well. So quite interesting, isn't it? You can bring a lot of the information that we've had in the exercise science domain, attach that to things such as, in the dietetics and the sleep areas, and really have a great outcome for clients.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're still working with athletes, just that they work in the office now instead of the arena.
Yeah, and we often say, Carl, that they're lounge chair athletes. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them are actually out there and exercising and doing well themselves. But most of our clients actually have a real passion for sport. Most people have a passion for sport, even if they don't perform sport. They're armchair athletes in a way. So one of the areas when we were presenting our workshops, our day workshops, we were using a big facility, a sports facility. We had professional teams that played there and trained there. And often we're up in one of the rooms doing the presentations, and then I'd notice that all my clients were looking past me and sort of out onto the field through the window in the background. And I didn't even have to turn around. I'd say to them, I bet you that the professional teams out there training, aren't they? And they'd have a bit of a laugh and say, yes, they are, Mike. And so why don't we take a break for 5 minutes and go up and stand by the window and watch them train for a while, and then we'll come back and continue on. It's amazing. People that you would not even think are into sport, are so into sport. So utilizing a lot of analogies and a lot of examples from the sporting arena goes down really well with the corporate area, because they understand it. They understand it intuitively about how they have to be training and how important it is for things that we talk about. For example, we talk a lot about the importance of recovery. Recovery is really important. You can work really hard, but if you don't have a well-planned and strategic recovery built in, then you're not going to survive as a corporate entity, basically, a corporate businessman, businesswoman. Well, it's the same with athletes. I mean, we know athletes can work extremely hard, but if they're not smart in how they recover, then they're not going to optimize their performance. So we can bring a lot of things from the from our area that you and I've been working in into the corporate space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I in my previous company, I worked a little bit with this corporate athletes as well. And it was really interesting because, like you said, they come in and they actually want to train like athletes. They kind of behave like athletes. They've got the whole, like you say, nutrition, recovery, all the exercise going in. On top of that, like you said, they're doing 60 to 70 hours of work for their corporation. Sometimes I think the amount of work they're doing is more than an athlete that's working. But yeah, and these guys still somehow find a way to enjoy, playing the sport that they're doing, or just staying fit and healthy. So yeah.
Yes, you're right. And what's really interesting is that you talk about sometimes they may be working hours in excess of what you might be finding with athletes, although athletes work extremely hard, as we know. But yeah, some of these corporate and clients are doing huge amounts of work. Like I said, in excess of 60, 70 hours plus a week. And we know from the research that if you're working in excess of about 55 hours a week, then your risk of cardiovascular disease increases by about 16%. So these people are doing well in excess of that. And so they're at real risk for a number of these different chronic diseases, as we call them. A lot of things such as, obesity in America now is classed as a chronic disease. In my home country of Australia, we haven't classed this as a chronic disease yet, because I think it has huge implications for the health system and the government for paying out. But effectively, a lot of the chronic diseases come to the fore when you're doing huge amounts of hours and you're not looking after yourself. And often that's what happens with our corporate clients, is that they're so dedicated to their work that things such as sleep takes a back seat. The old joke about there's plenty of time to sleep when you're dead, and all these types of things. And their nutrition can go by the wayside, and they're having a lot of fast food or processed foods, and their exercise goes through the floor. And all of these things that are disappearing for the sake of the work are things that are actually conferring protection to them in the longer term in terms of their health and well-being, and also then back into their workplace. I mean, if people aren't healthy and well, it's going to affect their work as well. If they're a top corporate athlete, as we call them, but a top corporate client, they're working extremely hard and they're not looking after themselves, then it's going to come back and bite them anyway in terms of their performance ability. So coming to people like yourselves, like where you're working before, and getting that exercise, looking after their lifestyle, actually comes back to pay dividends in terms of their work anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, what would you share with our viewers? For example, someone who's working in the corporate world and wants to start an exercise regime, or like a kind of like a fitness regime together, and make some lifestyle changes for the better, for their health, obviously. What are the baseline things that they should be doing to start off? Because you don't want them to start off and start running 10Ks and exercising 5 times a week, and then cutting their diet down by 1,500 calories. You want them to start slow and slowly build up. So what do you think is what's your suggestions on a good way to slowly build that up and to start off?
Well, I think one of the things you said is fantastic. I mean, you don't want to go in crazy to start with, because all they're likely to do is drop out again. We have to have a look at why they're not exercising, if they're not exercising at that point, and how we could potentially get them to start looking at that more favorably. So we use the trans-theoretical model of change, where people can come in at different levels. They might not even be thinking about exercise. So if you try to get them exercising and not even thinking of it at that stage, it's a tough ask. Or they may be in the pre-contemplation stage, so the contemplation stage where they're looking at it, but they don't know what to do. So coming to some experts, some people that really do know about exercise, can set them up a routine safely and start them really slowly, as you said, and progress them along. Or they might be in the preparation stage. They've already been looking around. They kind of know what they're doing. They've been even searching out for some people like yourselves, for example, and they still haven't taken that step yet into actually doing the exercise. And that's again where our exercise experts come into their own, because you can set up really safe routines for them. So I say to people, have a look, ask around, do a little bit of research first, have a think about why you'd like to be exercising, what's the reason you'd like to do that, and then start gradually. As simple things as a walk, a brisk walk, or even a slow walk to start with, and then slowly increasing intensity. If you want to get a bit more, a little bit more complicated or a little bit more advanced, you go along and see some people that know about this area that can help them. And it's a slow, small steps, I think, is really important in all the areas, not just exercise, but in terms of nutrition, in terms of the importance of sleep, and that's really overlooked in a lot of our clients, athletes too, for that matter. They don't tend to get the quality and quantity of sleep, a lot of them, that's so important. So all of these areas, we start slowly and just gradually progress along, and wherever possible, if you don't know much about it, reach out to people. If you don't know what your underlying health status is, reach out to people that can do some testing for you. Go along and have a chat to your medical practitioner. See if they can run some bloods and some basic tests to get an idea, and the doctor can give them an idea how they're going. Go along to experts like you that can actually do some testing on them to see where they are physically. How are they going, in terms of their exercise, what levels their cardiovascular fitness at, their strength, their power, all these things that are really important for their long-term health.
Yeah. Thanks. That's really good advice, Mike. Thank you very much for that. Mike, moving on a little bit, this is a topic that I know that you present quite a bit on the benefits of exercise and the dangers of sedentary lifestyle. Maybe just share with our viewers a little bit about that, because I know that moves on to the next topic, which unfortunately is something that we deal with a lot, which is depression and anxiety. Tell us how that's linked together, and just any words of advice from there.
Well, there's certainly a plethora of research out there on the perils of actually having a sedentary lifestyle. So in other words, not getting enough exercise. And unfortunately, that is a very large percentage of our population. I think certainly in my country, we're looking at around about 2025. We've probably already hit it, to be quite honest, but they predicted in the research about 2025, we'd probably have about 75% of our population who are overweight or obese. And that's the same as many of the other developed nations. And that's a real worry. That's often driven by one, a sedentary lifestyle, two, poor food choices, three, it could be the stress that's involved with the workplace they're in. And believe it or not, stress can lead to that as well, because it leads to what we call a low-grade inflammation or a metaflammation. And the beautiful thing is, if you start incorporating physical activity or movement into your life, I sometimes have to be a little bit careful with my corporate clients using the word exercise, because it can often cause a bit of a stress in itself and worry in itself. So we use more gentle terms such as movement or physical activity or something along these lines. But certainly increasing your movement or physical activity or exercise in your life has some myriad benefits. It goes across so many disease states. In fact, many medical professors would say that exercise, if you could package it up into a pill, it'd probably be one of the most effective pills on the market, because it works across so many different areas compared to say something like a beta blocker for blood pressure, for example, that works primarily on blood pressure, or a statin which works primarily on cholesterol, or an oral agent you might be taking for diabetes that might work on one aspect of glucose control. Exercise has this wonderful benefit across so many different areas, and we say holistically as well. So in terms of physically and mentally as well. And that's sort of leading into what you were chatting about a few moments ago about around anxiety, depression, those sort of areas. I mean, certainly in my country of Australia, 1 in 10 people could expect to suffer from anxiety at some point in their life, and probably, you'll know of somebody that's suffering from anxiety. Massive problems. There's different forms of anxiety, of course. Depression, By 2030, they're predicting that depression is going to be #1 for disability-adjusted life years in the world. Um, I read an article a while ago that America feels that they've already hit #1. They're not well before 2030, but certainly the prediction is 2030. Depression is going to be our #1 worry in terms of disability-adjusted life years. And the really nice thing is that movement, regular movement, alongside other things as well, in terms of good nutrition. There's a growing area now in nutrition called nutritional psychiatry. Professor Felice Jacka is really heavily involved with that from the Food and Mood Center at Deakin University. She's got a great book out actually called Brain Changer, I think it's called, and it's a great book around the nutritional psychiatry. But in terms of our space and the exercise space, it's been shown to be very effective in terms of working with clients that are suffering from depression or anxiety. And as you know, there's so many people presenting with but because unfortunately there's still such a stigma associated with it, a lot of people won't even seek treatment. They're worried about the stigma. So it's probably really underreported, to be quite honest with you. When we see the figures of the people presenting with depression and anxiety, it's probably really underreported. I know that certainly at Harvard Medical Center, in their sleep clinics there, over 50% of people presenting with sleep problems are actually presenting with anxiety or depression. So mood disorders, according to one of the papers that I read.
You know, on that topic, Mike, how is this, or how is the depression, anxiety different in an athlete where, you know, the athletes are moving and training, you know, so often, every day, basically for hours and hours a day? Is there a difference between the depression and anxiety that they're facing from the athletes to the corporate athletes, perhaps?
That's a great question, Carl. Actually, I've not seen any research looking at differences in depression between athletes and corporate individuals in terms of what might be, are they different in terms of the underlying causes? I mean, there's research out there to show that exercise is a fantastic modality for working with depression and anxiety and such. But you know, if there's any difference in mechanisms, I don't think the mechanisms are any different. The mechanisms are probably the same. So you could be asking, well, why do you still have people with who are exercising regularly having depression? Well, it may be that they do still suffer from depression, but maybe at lower levels than people that aren't exercising, or there could be other causes. You know, it's a multifactorial thing. Exercise is just one factor in a treatment plan for depression. In fact, we never say to people that come to see us at the clinic setting, and I still do clinics. In fact, I work with a psychiatry clinic here in my hometown, working with some of their patients using exercise and lifestyle medicine approaches alongside their team. They have a psychiatrist, they have a nurse practitioner, they have a dietitian on board, they have GPs involved as well. And exercise is just one of the interventions that we actually use. So we don't say to people, well, you know, you're suffering from depression, for example, you're on antidepressants, so just stop taking your antidepressants and start exercising. We'd never say such a thing like that. What we say is that let's work in a complementary fashion, and we see how you travel, and then the psychiatrist or your GP, who has the power and the authority to make the decisions on medication, they will say, look, that seems to be traveling really well. We might just reduce the dosage a little and see how they go. And a number of our clients have their dosages reduced dramatically. Some come off the medications altogether under the care of their medical practitioners, is really important to mention. Yeah. And other people are still on the medications, they're on them for life, but they're on a reduced dose. And what's really exciting about that is often a lot of the negative side effects that come along with a lot of medications are what we call dose dependent. So it's a dose response there. So the higher the dose, the more likely you are to suffer from one of those side effects, negative side effects. So if you can reduce the dosage, you may be able to live with that medication without having too many problems, because you've got it low enough that you're not experiencing some of those side effects. So it comes in all shapes and forms, and exercise is just one of the things. We look at sleep being enormously important. There's a bidirectional relationship between poor quality or disrupted sleep and the mood disorders such as depression and anxiety. So bidirectional meaning people that are suffering from anxiety and depression tend to have worse sleep, and people that are suffering from poor sleep have a higher risk of having some mood disorders as well, anxiety and mood disorders. So exercise is just one of those things alongside sleep, nutrition, eliciting the relaxation response. In other words, sort of a meditative mindfulness-based technique. It's just one part of the whole package.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, you're right about, the different, there are many different factors that affect, that one thing, right? And which leads me to my next question, which I know you speak a lot about as well, which is inflammation. It's talked a lot now. There's a lot more information on this now. Everyone's, a lot of fitness people are also jumping on this to use this to sell their businesses and all that. Maybe share with the viewers a little bit more on inflammation and how that's related and interconnected to everything else.
It's an area that I'm really interested in the inflammatory response, and certainly a number of factors can increase that inflammatory response. And the food that you're eating, I mean, a poor diet, junk foody type of diet, a highly processed diet that we believe is linked in with increased inflammation. Poor sleep is being linked into an increased inflammation. So people suffering from sleep apnea as well, they believe there's a link in there with an inflammatory response. And of course, people who aren't exercising on a regular basis, have a sedentary lifestyle, do have an opportunity to have if they're mixed in with the other things, with stress, and just stress alone, distress, I should say, because remember, stress comes in two forms. It comes in eustress, which is good stress, which we all need to motivate us and keep us going. I mean, you wouldn't be running your business unless you had some stress. So you can convert that stress into a really positive, but it's the distress that we're more worried about. It's that negative stress. That can be a worry about, people worrying about their finances. The COVID is probably a really good indication, worrying about, people's health, about their family's health, about their parents' health, about, are they losing a job? Unemployment's gone up dramatically. So are they going to be able to put food on the table? They're the sort of stresses. Are you worried? Are you in an environment where you're working so much, you're not having enough time for a good work-life balance with your family and those types of things? They're the sort of stresses that can come in that we believe lead to that low-grade inflammation that they call metainflammation, and that in the longer term seems to affect so many different areas in the body. So it's linked to so many different chronic diseases, from obesity to depression, to heart disease, to diabetes, to so many of these different areas, rheumatoid arthritis, all these types of things. There seems to be this underlying low-grade inflammation as one of the components in those diseases. And so if we can actually have some interventions to target inflammation and to try and reduce that systemic inflammation, it becomes really important. One of the big things I've been enormously interested in recent years, and I'm certainly still a newbie to this area, and that is the gut health. So the gut microbiota and the gut microbiome. And there's a real link that seems in there as well with inflammation. So, and the really interesting thing is that the gut communicates with the brain. We have the gut-brain axis, and if you have a dysbiosis, a gut dysbiosis, meaning an unhealthy gut, then that seems to, we believe, communicate with the brain. It communicates a few different ways. It communicates through one of the major highways, is what we call the vagus nerve. And we know in exercise about the importance of the vagus nerve as well, because we're exercising on a regular basis, and the vagus nerve can actually cause the heart rate to reduce. So we get that, we have a parasympathetic effect on the heart. So we get a slowing of the heart, we get a slowing of the breathing. But the vagus nerve, and the vagal part refers to wandering, so wandering nerve. So it goes down, it makes connections to the heart, the lungs, the gut, and some other organs as well. And so what it can do, it can give us this more of a relaxation type of response. So what we're seeing is that if you're not looking after the gut, then it's not looking after you as well. And that's now been believed to be linked in with an inflammatory state as well. So if we get the gut under control, in terms of healthy food coming in, reducing stress, exercising. Really interestingly, I don't know if you're aware, but there's been some great research showing that people who are exercising on a regular basis have a greater diversity of gut microbiota. And that seems to be really important. Not just having a few of the good ones, but having a good variety of the positive gut microbiota. So that, the bacterial species, there's other things besides bacteria in the gut, but we'll talk bacteria as the main one. And there are so many bacteria in the gut, for example, if you were to actually put them head to toe, so basically if you're putting them lengthening, they could reach all the way from the Earth to the moon. That's how many there are. So you can imagine that there's a lot of stuff. In fact, if you look at the number of cells in our body that are actually human, and you compare them to the number of cells that are non-human, we're less human than we are non-human. So we're about 43 to 46% or so human cells, and the remainder are non-human cells, such as bacterial cells, archaea, these types of things. And then if you look at the genes, we're even worse. We're only about 1% human, or about 99% not human if you're looking at the total number of genes. So not looking after your gut has huge implications for our health. And that's not just for our corporate people, this is for our athletes as well. And I think there's going to be a lot more focus. It's already getting quite a bit of focus in the normal, the otherwise non-athletic population, but I think you'll see a lot more coming into the athletic population as well.
Okay. I mean, it's funny how you touch on that last topic, because that was going to be my last question to you. And it was going to be, in this whole area of lifestyle medicine that you're currently working on, obviously now you're saying that it's beneficial to athletes. Are we going to see more athletes, and what are the little things or the small little things at the start that athletes should start looking into, for performance-wise?
Well, I'll sort of predicate that question by my answer by saying that what we have to remember is that athletes will have an athletic career for a certain period of time, and when they finish their athletic career, they have a life after that, and that's really important. Of course, a lot of psychologists work a lot on that area about getting the athletes into that mindset that it will finish, that the really heavy competitive period where they're competing and such will finish at some point, and they've got to be ready for a life after that. And so, and of course, hopefully in that life after their real competitive phase, they're still going to be incorporating exercise and other lifestyle interventions in there as well to have a healthy life. What we'd like to see is have our athletes being healthy all the way up to the end, and it's what we call a compression of morbidity. So what we want to try and do is, instead of people going to their normal way where they get to a certain level and they start decaying in the later years and they have a poor quality of life, we try to get what we call a compression of morbidity, so we hold a good, healthy lifestyle right up until very, very close to the end, rather than having a prolonged period where we drop. Now, coming back to your sort of question, what can athletes be doing now into using a lifestyle medicine approach? Well, it fits beautifully to the athlete model, because athletes know the importance of having a very healthy diet, not having a highly processed diet. So that's one of the really big important things. Trying to have a lot of eating the rainbow of fruit and veggies, for example, having enough protein in their diet for what they need for muscle, but also having a lot of the antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds that's going to help them in terms of their health. Having good quality sleep and good quantity of sleep is really important, because we know that if the quality and the quantity of sleep is down, then that has real impacts on many things. But one of the things would be the immune system, for example. And the immune system is so important for our athletes. And we think there's probably a cutoff around about 6 hours or so of sleep. If you're getting under about 6 hours, then the immune system seems to be really impacted. So for our athletes, really important. And I know that Shona Howson at the Australian Institute of Sport was doing some great work around sleep for a number of years with the Australian Institute of Sport athletes, just realizing how important it was. And they were doing a lot of that work leading into Rio. She was doing some awesome work in that area. And so sleep for athletes is really important, just as it is with our corporate clients as well. And then, of course, we exercise. Well, that's a given for us, isn't it? So we've already talked about how that's great for an anti-inflammatory response, how it's good for the gut microbiota, how it's good for things like the glucose control and number of other different areas. So I think that's a no-brainer for us, isn't it, for you and I, for the exercise side. And then, of course, the other thing is trying to elicit what we call the relaxation response, which has been really well researched for over 40 years, well over 40 years now, by Herbert Benson from Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital, showing that if you can use some sort of mindfulness-based breathing meditative techniques, then you can really have a great effect in terms of your mental health and also your inflammatory response, which we know is kind of linked into the mental health anyway to a degree.
Mike, we could go on and on and on talking about answering questions, but I know you've got to run off somewhere. First of all, thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you very much for answering all those questions. And I hope you stay safe. Hope the family stays safe once everything is all settled. Hopefully we meet again, either in Australia or back here in Singapore. Thanks again, Mike, for being on the show.
Fantastic, Carl. Look, really welcome, mate, and so thrilled to see you doing really well in your business and in life, and you're looking really healthy as well. Can't wait to get back up there to Singapore again to meet up personally once this COVID thing settles, and so we can have a good chat over a coffee and catch up on some old times. So thanks so much for inviting me on the show. I really appreciate it, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Mike.